Thank you all for coming here tonight, and it is my great pleasure to introduce TIBERIO CAETANO, who will talk about ethical data science today. TIBERIO is co-founder and chief scientist at Ambiata, where they use machine learning solutions for clients across various industries with a range of applications, looking at retail, telco, insurance, banking, media, and education. He also is a researcher in the field of machine learning, an academic by training, publishes regularly. He's been on the program committee to the top machine learning conferences and graduated numerous PhD students. And his main areas of interest are machine learning, causality, and ethics. That's all for me. Please join me in welcoming TIBERIO. It's a pleasure to have you. And thank you.
First question, can everyone hear me properly? Please speak from. Yeah, good. Everyone, can you raise your? Good, excellent. All right, so first I'm very grateful for all of you to being here this evening. I hope we can have an interesting conversation. I hope to talk for about 40 minutes, but plus or minus 5 or 10, give or take. And then what I'm really interested in is to engage in a dialogue, in a conversation, because for about a year now I've been trying to understand more about ethics. And to my astonishment, it's way more complicated than I thought it was when I started. And I still can't make sense of it. I still can't really understand it. So I apologize from the beginning. I'm not actually here to tell you very deep realizations or enlightenments about ethics, because I'm still working it out myself. So it's more like a dialogue. It's more like an opportunity for me to learn more about you, about what you think about this thing, and maybe together we can all make sense of this very, very interesting and relevant field. Okay? So that said, I would like to start the conversation on my end, let's put it this way. All right? Okay, so I'm going to structure this into 3 pieces. Right? We're going to start looking at ethics, but of course, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not an ethicist, so I'm going to give you a very different perspective on how I see ethics, okay? And it's of course very compressed. It's a gigantic field, and it goes back thousands of years of thinking in this field, as we have, since at least Aristotelic times. So what is ethics, right? So where better to start, since our subject is ethics, than World War I. Okay? So this is a bomber, a British bomber from the World War I. And the question here is this. During World War I, the British were losing lots of their bombers over Germany, right? Lots. And it turns out that they decided at some point that they wanted to add armor to the planes, right? To avoid losing so many planes. And then the problem of course with armor is that it's heavy, it's expensive, so they wanted to add armor to the most critical parts of the bombers. Now, so what happened? So basically, here's the good news. Well, the good news is that luckily, whenever the bombers, they returned from their bombing runs, they had kept detailed records of where the bombers were hit, right? So, and then they all kept all those detailed records, and there were, hundreds of bombers coming back. And then eventually what they did, okay, let's superimpose those diagrams and try and figure out some pattern of what's going on here. Where should we add armor so that we lose less bombs? Okay? So the question I have for you, and what they found, that there are lots of hits in the wings, in the nose, and the tail, right? So what do you think they did?
There's armor to where there are no heat.
Look at what's critical.
Well, luckily this guy was there. Okay. Abraham Wald, an Austrian mathematician and economist. And he said, well, let's add armor to the undamaged area. Not to the damaged area. Right? Do you understand why?
Yes, I see the logic now. Because the ones that had damage there didn't come back.
That's correct. That is correct. Those that were hit in the engine, they didn't return to tell the story. So it would have been a really stupid idea to add armor to where we had data, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I am starting with this example just to tell you, since this is a data science method, that data is not the solution. It's potential energy, and as you know, potential energy can be used for the good or for the bad. It can be used intelligently or stupidly. All right? And don't make this mistake. Don't make the fatal mistake of assuming that the availability of data gives you a license not to think. This is the biggest mistake I see data scientists making today. You have data, you have computers, you have algorithms, you have AI, you have machine learning, you have all of this stuff, okay? And then you bring all of those components together to presumably solve a problem, which is what you should be caring about, right? And guess what? Where is the thinking? Where is the thinking? So I'd like to start with this question. Okay? Where is the thinking? We need philosophy now, immediately. We need to rescue a tradition that has been around for thousands of years and that unfortunately in this community is not the status quo. I'm not talking here about blue sky philosophy. I'm talking here about what philosophers call practical philosophy, pragmatic philosophy. And as you know, philosophy can be split into three fields, three main fields: metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Metaphysics is the study of what is. Epistemology is the study of what we can know about what there is. And ethics is the study about what we should do about what there is. So what ethics really is pragmatic philosophy. It's not armchair philosophy that is useful, but perhaps not directly for you. The philosophy that's useful for you is ethics, grounded in epistemology, grounded in knowledge, and we're going to see that in a moment, why it needs to be grounded in philosophy and epistemology. So ethics, the way I see ethics, is the philosophy of conduct. Is the philosophy of conduct. Is the philosophy that tells me how should I behave, right? Now, having told that story, how about we look at some pictures now? Let's look at the picture. What is going on here? Who can tell me?
Burning someone at the stake.
Witch hunt.
Witch hunt.
Witch hunt. A witch is being burnt. All right? A witch is being burnt. Please show of hands who thinks this has ethical issues. No, I'm serious. Please show of hands who thinks this has ethical issues. Okay, so I can see pretty much everyone. Good. So now let me tell you something that certainly some of you know, and maybe many of you know. Right. These witches, they were dancing counterclockwise, and those men who were committing them to the flames thought that famine, plague, and war were coming because they were dancing counterclockwise. And that's why they were committed to the flames. Think about it. They were conducting perfect utilitarian reason. They didn't want their kids, their tribes, their kingdoms to perish because of plague, because of war, because of famine. And in their theoretical understanding of nature, they thought that the genuine causal factor driving that was those women dancing counterclockwise. Therefore, they thought it perfectly reasonable to commit them to the flames. Okay? And what you are telling me, and I agree with all of you, there are ethical issues there. What have we learned from this example? We've learned something really important. Ethics is not only about intention. It's not only about goodwill. It's not only about what I want to happen. Ethics is about competence. It's about knowledge. It's about my understanding of the world. If my understanding of the world is such that I believe that women dancing counterclockwise are going to end up in hundreds and thousands of people dead, that's a problem, right? It's an ethical problem. It's not a failure of intent. They still wanted the welfare of their people. They just thought that that was the easiest way to get the welfare of their people. All right? Okay. Now, intent is not enough. Yeah? I'm saying nothing new here. You probably know that. Intent is not enough. The problem that we have is that whenever I see ethical debates, or whenever I see people talking about ethics, in general, people talk about intentions, good intentions. Good intentions are necessary, but not sufficient. There are two problems in ethics. One I call the problem of valuation. The problem of valuation, which is related to intent, is the problem of assigning a value or a degree of desirability to a given configuration of the patterns of the atoms in the universe. For every possible world out there, a world where there's famine everywhere, a world where everyone is high everywhere on drugs, a world where everyone is happy, or a world where everyone is successful, each one of those worlds has a different valuation, ethical valuation, a different desirability. Okay? It's obvious that certain worlds are better than others. Okay? We have scientific evidence showing that there's such a thing as pain, there's such a thing as suffering, and there's such a thing as well-being, contentment, fulfillment, happiness. That's one problem. But as we've seen in the case of the witches, it's not the only problem. The other problem is the problem of causation. And that's related to competence. That's a very different problem indeed. Because that problem is the problem of how do I navigate in this space of possible worlds? How do I go from the world that we have today to a world that's better? To a world that has higher value according to my valuation. That's how I think about ethics. And much of the confusion that I see in the debate about ethics arises because people do not clearly differentiate between these two different problems. And I think they're fundamentally different problems. And it's beautiful to see some analogs that this has with a lot of the machine learning literature. I won't be able to talk much about that today though, but we can talk about that offline. Now, I want to specifically highlight the importance of the causation problem. This is a very hard problem. I've been working on this problem for many years, trying to understand more about causality. How do you get the results that you want? how do you do something that will eventually lead to the outcomes that you care about? That's the problem of causality. How to identify which actions will lead to which results. Now, much of the issues I'm going to talk about ethics today pertain to this field, the issues of causation, the issues of understanding that question. The question of valuation is just as important. I consider the question of valuation, though, beyond the scope of our chat today, but certainly at least as important. So what I've done so far, let's recap. I've tried to provide my own personal understanding of how I see ethics as relevant for this audience, for the data science community. Now I'm going to try and provide you a few examples of ethical challenges, okay? And we've seen some ethical challenges recently in the media and in other sources around ethics in the world of data, in the world of AI, in the world of technology. All right, information technology. So let's go through a few of those examples. Sorry. Who is familiar with this example? Who was familiar with this example before I showed it? Right, few people. So this is an interesting example of a mislabeling of a machine learning algorithm. Is trying in this case to label each of these images according to a tag. I don't know if everyone can read, but what happens here is that we have several images and they have tags like skyscrapers on the top left, or cars on the top right, graduation in the bottom right, bikes on the bottom left, and airplanes on the top. It turns out that at the bottom, middle, you have people with black skin that were mislabeled as gorillas, all right? And this became quite a sort of a prominent, it was quite prominent in the media. Yeah. So that's a mistake. It is a mistake. It was a mistake for black people for gorillas, but it could have been black people for cars, or black people for graduation, or black people for airplanes, right? But no, it was black people for gorillas. Right? And because it was black people for gorillas, we noticed that. And we tell a story about it. And someone comes and prepares a lecture or a talk and gives a talk about that and includes that in their slides. All right, otherwise it wouldn't be there. All right? Okay, so clearly there is a representation problem here. There is a mistake. There is a technical mistake that a machine learning algorithm made. But that mistake is ethically charged. Is very ethically charged. So here's another example. I'll let you appreciate and understand what's going on here. So here we have Google Translate in an attempt to, by the way, who was familiar with this? Show of hands? Yeah. So here we have Google Translate trying to translate English to Estonian. And we have he is a babysitter, and she is a lawyer, translated to Estonian, and then you get the translation back and ask to translate back to English. Well, it turns out that gender pronouns in Estonian apparently don't behave the same way as in English. And the translation to English is she's a babysitter, and he's a lawyer. Now, what's going on here? What's going on here? Who tells me what's going on here? Did engineers at Google planned it? Did they plan the gorillas before? Did they plan this?
I think so.
Do you think so? Perhaps. Well, there's a positive probability that that could have happened. Yes. Did they deliberately engineer what we are observing here? No. Articulate in a different way? Yeah?
If you're looking for a statistically correct answer,
then babysitters usually.
Good. I like to see when people talk about these lies that I put out. Yeah, good. Very good. So clearly we have an issue here that is not too difficult to figure out what's going on. I mean, in the training data, probably there were too many more female babysitters and male and relatively male lawyers. And in the translation, all what Google is doing is just really looking at the stats and making the best possible bet. It's going to minimize the error. That's how machine learning works, right? What I can probably tell you is that in the design of the machine learning algorithm, there was no constraint saying that, please, underweight the fact that its females were usually labeled as babysitters. Underweight. That instruction was probably not present in the design of the system.
I guess something that they might have been able to do because of the fact that there's no gender in the Estonian one is maybe they are a babysitter, they are a lawyer instead.
If we had a gender neutral singular pronoun, we could solve it.
Exactly.
You'd have to say he or she, they, intonates plural.
I have a solution
not
for
always.
that.
Not always.
Yeah, but it could. So he
I love, everyone is figuring out solutions for that. That's exactly what I want to prompt in this presentation. I want people to find solutions for this
Just take
problem.
the TH.
Let's look at this one. Let's look at what's going on here. Take a look and tell me think about what's going on here. So this is all real, right? I'm not making this thing up. So imagine if you're looking for jobs and then you heard someone, oh, Stephanie Williams. I say, no, it's not Stephanie Williams. And it's, do you actually mean Stephen Williams? Gender discrimination, involuntary gender discrimination once again. All right? Again, not deliberately engineered. Again, as a side effect of a machine learning procedure that simply didn't take that explicitly into account and is optimizing some loss function that just defines the traditional sort of unsuitability of matches of two different languages.
Is that our fault?
Sorry?
It's our fault that we're taking that as gender. It's nothing to do with gender. The machine's saying it's probably got a lot more results for Stephen. That's why it's spelled. What they do is spell.
But do you think this result is desirable?
How is it gender? It's not really.
It's probabilistic. It's not gender.
Yeah, but the question is, do we as a society want an outcome like that or not?
Yes, we do.
All right.
Probably do.
All right, that's fine. I'm not saying. Well, again, let's go back to the two principles of ethics that we laid out at the beginning. There is valuation and there is causation. And I said very clearly at the start, I'm not going into the valuation camp today. It's too charged for me to deal with in 40 minutes. And to deal with all the combinatorial explosions of different views that would turn up in the audience. Right? Now, we are just looking at the causation. You can question whether this is a desirable or not desirable, but you can't question that this is ethically charged. You can't question that there will be debates. You can't question that this is a space that people need to think hard about how to deal with this question. Now let's go. Why is all of this happening? I see there are questions, but maybe let me keep going, and then we'll grab questions as according to a frequency that I will determine. Okay, since I'm the sort of sole chair here. So why, right? Why is all this happening? So this is just a side effect of certain things. All right, it's a side effect of the way modern software development happens. Now, traditional software development is this. The paradigm is the developer codifies the algorithm, the machine executes the algorithm. That's it. Machine learning software development paradigm is fundamentally different. So the developer codifies the goal, the purpose, what ought to be achieved. And there are different languages, technical languages for that. For example, in machine learning, you can define this is the loss function or constraints of your optimization problem, is the definition of your estimator. Or it's a posterior if you are in a Bayesian setting, all right? So in machine learning, the developer codifies the goal, but it's the machine who actually writes the code, all right? Every time you're training a machine learning algorithm, you are producing as an output another algorithm. That algorithm that you produce as an output is what we call typically a classification algorithm, a classifier or a regressor. In the case of translation from one language to another, the algorithm that the machine learning is producing as an output is a translation algorithm. Is a machine that whenever you provide English text, it produces Estonian text, right? So, machine learning software development paradigm is fundamentally distinct. Fundamentally distinct. The code that doesn't get to write all the lines of code directly, right? So think about it. It's really meta program. That's really what it is. If you don't explicitly tell the machine to avoid doing something, why on earth would it try to avoid it? There's no reason why we should be surprised with all those examples that were described before. You're giving a goal. You're providing a goal, a loss function, some constraints that are very naive. You're providing tons of training data that describe how many people have labeled the data before. And you press a button. Machine learning spits out what? Millions of lines of code telling you, or thousands or hundreds or tens, depending how complex your final algorithm is, the classification algorithm, the translation algorithm, the tagging algorithm. And then you get out something that simply optimizes the goal that you provided. And if you haven't explicitly encoded into this entire process certain constraints that you wanted to be respected according to your valuation function of your ethic, why on earth should those things be respected? The machine is just following what you're telling it to do. So we shouldn't be surprised. That's the reason why those examples happened. There's a big problem here, right? There's a big problem here. So it's a challenge for you to go and think about. So we have a bunch of people here, so go home, think about. And the problem, obviously, as we know, because of the second law of thermodynamics, there are many more ways for things to go wrong than for things to go right. Okay? And this is really a big problem. It really is a big problem. And there are many scientists worldwide trying to figure out. And no one really knows the question of whether we can use more and more and more data indefinitely and still have a positive cost-benefit ratio in terms of adding new, constraints to make up for the fact that we don't fully understand all the rules that could come out of that data. Maybe there's more work to be done in adding those constraints and fixing things than in actually coding the whole thing from scratch without data at all. We don't know the answer to that question. Isn't that quite fascinating? I find it very fascinating. But, it's cool, so we keep trying. We need to progress somehow, so we need to keep going.
Should we go to classifier for it?
We don't have yet a classifier for it as far as I can tell. So let's be more concrete, a little bit more concrete. Let's say we are in the domain of, we are here at CBA, so let's say we are in the domain of credit risk modeling, and there is a typical, procedure for modeling, trying to identify risk, right? you go and you select your training data, training validation test sets, you define your predictive variables of interest, you know? For example, product holdings, which credit cards you have, that sort of thing. If you have a home loan, your transaction history, demographic data. You define the target variable. You define what you want to classify as a good, as a credit-worthy person, not credit-worthy person. Right? Credit-worthy, let's say someone who has repaid their credit, you know, they paid the credit card over the past few months, and someone who hasn't done that. Has other definitions. So those definitions are typically, I know that because I've done work on that. You know, here, that's a while ago, and other places as well, and I'm sure lots of people do that. That's basically what we all do. We are modelers, so we go and define those abstractions, and we need to make assumptions in doing that. And then we define an estimation approach, like, for example, maybe some logistic regression with maximum likelihood, or regularized maximum likelihood, whatever you're doing. And then you run your machine learning optimization algorithm, you get results, you report results. Typically, you report results on your holdout set, in your entire holdout set. And you get the average performance, maybe you get some error bars around your average performance, and then you deem your model successful and unsuccessful based on that. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with this from the point of view of, technically speaking. But let's see what you're actually doing. So what this is doing, this is not solving the problem of credit risk estimation. This is solving the problem that your assumptions you've made have created. So, in doing so, you have a mathematical procedure implemented in computer, will spit out some results, and you as a data scientist, because you were really enraptured by the beauty of the entire exercise, you look at good numbers, superior to the others that have been reported previously, and you declare victory. You declare victory. You say, I won. Here, I want my bonus. Well, I'm here to tell you this is not good enough, okay? This is not good enough. It's not. We have to change. What we're really talking about is treating humans. We're talking about executing interventions in human beings, just like a surgery, just like a psychotherapeutic treatment. Is that how you say it? Just like any other kind of intervention. I'm giving you a loan, not giving you a loan. Am I pricing your insurance at $800 or $900? Am I actually exposing this particular post in your Facebook feed or those other posts? I'm controlling the kind of information that's in front of you every day. Am I deciding which partners I'm recommending for you in this dating app? Which may result in whether you're going to have kids or not, or, or get the right partner or not for your life, or whether you get divorced in the future or not. These are consequential decisions that you all are involved in, and that you all have a very important role. And moreover, it's particularly insidious because it doesn't look obvious, does it? It doesn't look obvious. It doesn't seem like you are so responsible as you actually are. And I'm talking about you just to scare you off. But the same is true for me. We are all very responsible. Even if no one is out there at the moment to hold us accountable for this, it's on us. We have to do it. Mea maxima. It's on us. We have to do this. We need to ensure that the personalization is right. We want a world where we treat people in the right way. There's nothing wrong with personalization. That's the world we want. Well, we can also create that. That's another option. Now, and here is the bad news. The bad news is that because of the second law of thermodynamics, and because you can also laugh at what I just showed, because your brain evolved throughout millions of years to understand images. That's why you're laughing. But your brain didn't evolve throughout millions of years to understand transaction data. Yeah? So what are you going to do about it? Do you think that by some miracle, transaction data is not going to display issues of this type? Do you think that by some sort of divine intervention, we are in a world at the moment where all decisions that are being made by the algorithms that we are all creating are not creating scenarios like the one I'm showing here? I just don't believe that's very likely. I don't believe that's very likely. So we have a lot of work to do to create that brain that we don't have, that can see through the patterns and the data and find all of these inappropriate, unethical, wrong decisions that we are making. And I talked about credit score, but of course the examples go and go and go. Everything. Today, the decisions that are driving this planet, they are mostly very complex decisions that emerge as a very dynamic relationship between humans and machines. And no one really understands what's going on. Right? So we need to be aware of that. We are talking about the likelihood of, what's going to be recommended to you as a partner. In a dating app, we are talking about whether you're going to get a home loan or not. What's going to be the interest rate? We are talking about whether you are going to be priced for your insurance at one amount or another. And moreover, because we are training on historical data, and who here wants the future to be equal to the past? Raise your hand. I don't. I don't want the future to repeat the past. We need to improve. And what's going to happen if we just train the data conditional based on historical data? Train the models based on historical data. Without evaluation, without an understanding of what we want to change, we're going to perpetuate all the wrong things that happened in the past that we don't want repeated in the future. Many challenges. I listed here just half a dozen of them. Scale, of course, these actions, punctual decisions that are invisible, that happen at a vast scale. We are talking about the information you see every day. We're talking about your interaction with all sorts of providers of services. We are talking about media. We're talking about banking. We're talking about insurance. We're talking about retail. We're talking about education. We're talking about government, welfare payments. We're talking about everything. Okay? It's scale. It's touching everything. Consistency. You get a racist algorithm. An algorithm that is perpetuating some bias that in your training set was there simply because people from a certain race were disadvantaged in the past. The algorithm is going to pick that up, is going to replicate it systematically across everyone in the future. Consistency. It's racist, and it's racist for everyone because it's learned that. It's going to be applied consistently. It's opaque. That's, again, that challenge I alluded to before about the fact that we don't really understand everything. We don't understand all these lines of code that the machine learning algorithm has produced. So we can't really provide an ethical rationale, because to understand if some decision is ethical, if you talk to a philosopher, well, you actually need to understand what's the thinking behind it. You want to understand the reasoning behind it. But we can't, because our brain is not just clever enough to actually parse all that code that the machine has generated. And if it were, we would be writing that code directly. So we are kind of really stuck here. So what do we do? Insidiousness. I hate this one. I hate this one. And this is the one. The reason why I hate this one is that you can't see, right? So it's very obvious. Those examples that I showed at the beginning, where you have gender discrimination, where you have mislabeling of black people for gorillas. They are very overt manifestations of ethically charged decisions because of our very, very unique machine we have between our ears. It's able to understand images, it's able to understand language. But most decisions are not like that. Most decisions are decisions that don't have an obvious ethical valence associated with them. You know, if you get your renewal of your insurance premium, and last year it was, $800 and now it's $850, well, that's okay. You just decide whether you're going to renew your policy, or you're going to maybe check, do some quoting online, right, or something like that. But it's not obvious that there is some unethical intervention made there. And you can actually, if you do the numbers, if you actually analyze them, well, you can actually figure out that that may have, and probably did come out of a machine learning algorithm that is pricing insurance based on a variety of factors, right? Many of them could be correlated with things like race, things like age, right? And maybe you've priced that at $850 instead of $800, again, just like last year, because you learned that people of that kind, people that have those features that that person has, they just maybe happen to be elderly people who would not actually be very likely to immediately go online and check for quotes with competitors, because they don't use computers, and the cost for them to quote with competitors would be too high. Therefore, if you increase by $50 from last year, you still keep them as a customer. Now, most decisions are not obviously, don't have an obvious ethical valence. And that's a big problem. I'm very concerned about that one. Unawareness. You simply don't have the data. This is very serious. Sometimes, even if you know how to solve, how to de-bias a given algorithm, you just don't have the data. You don't have access to the data that would allow you to do that. You don't have the information, the knowledge. From an epistemic perspective, you can't do anything. You know, we saw that ethics is grounded on knowledge, not only on will. It's grounded on an epistemologic basis. So if you just don't know this stuff, what do you do? And finally, incentives. How do you actually get people? How do you actually get organizations to behave ethically? We all here understand evolution. We all know how we got to this point. It turns out that we're all self-interest agents, right? And naturally, evolution favors cooperation many times. And in fact, humanity is the greatest example of the success of cooperation. Your markets, science, technology, all here working together trying to solve the problems of ethics. This is great, isn't it? But everyone knows that an unconditional cooperation strategy leads to eventual collapse. Doesn't work. So we need to figure out ways to incentivize institutions, businesses, governments, people, everyone to do the right thing. Whatever the right thing is, again, deliberately avoiding valuation properly. Well, it's been quite a journey, so I'm going to close with some positive comments. I'm not a negative person. Those people who know me know that I'm very optimistic. And I would like to close on some positive notes. And I'm very hopeful, very hopeful. I think we can address all of these questions successfully, just like our ancestors addressed their own challenges, right? Just like today, we basically don't see famine, don't see wars, we don't see plagues everywhere anymore. And that was achieved through knowledge. That was achieved through understanding. That was achieved through science and reason. And that's what we need to do to address these questions now. A few points of encouragement. Now, research progress in the AI community as a whole, and also in other communities, the legal community, the philosophy community, in other communities of scholars, been thinking very hard about these questions. And there has been good progress. Talk to me after this if you want to know more about that. Second, the growing number of institutes and research organizations that's coming along. You know, many people, many institutions all over the place are emerging, asking these questions. All right? People are becoming more and more aware of the importance of this problem, how serious it is. Public awareness is increasing, as we know, due to, it's becoming a public issue now. We know that there is a problem. We know that we as a society have to do something about it. So to close, what can you do? And this is my second last slide. First, understand what's your problem. The most important thing you can possibly do. Understand what your problem is. Your problem is never what you think it is. Never. Understand which data you really need to address your problem. Most of the data you have at your disposal is not the data you need to actually solve the real problem you have. Third, very important, think. All right? So data, computers, and algorithms are not a license not to think. If you could just do one thing, I would say, think. You've got a brain. All right? Use it. Use it. It's more powerful than the data. It's more powerful than the computers. It's more powerful than the sophisticated, deep neural fuzzy genetic algorithms you can come up with. Your brain. Identify sensitive groups in society. together with your colleagues, your bosses, that you don't want to do bad things against them. Evaluate your performance of your algorithms in those groups. See what's going on. Understand different measures of fairness. Read the literature. There are many definitions of fairness. Read the literature and apply them to your tools. Just write some code that implements those measures, and whenever you're assessing performance in your holdout set, don't do that for the entire holdout set. Do that for all the subgroups that you believe may have a sensitive trait, potentially victims of discrimination in the past and related ethical issues, and assess those fairness metrics against those subpopulations. Go and study causality and ethics. Go and study causality and ethics. And finally, be responsible for your data science actions. I can't overemphasize this. Be responsible for your data science actions. People are not holding you accountable. You should, because people can't see what we can see, right? We can see this, so we should act. We should take the responsibility. We should own this, and we should work towards solving this problem. Now, all these decisions, as I showed, are consequential. Don't get lost in detail. Go into the big picture. The future depends on your actions now. And my last slide is this one. You can be sure that we are burning some witches, thinking it's good. So my proposition is that we should work harder to find out the true causes of famine and plague. Thank you.
Plenty of food for thought. Who has a question?
Hi, so thank you for the talk, by the way, it was very, very insightful. I just noticed that the examples of bias that you gave were all explicitly failures of the model. A better model wouldn't have made those errors. Can you think of an exception to that? And does that just mean that we solve the ethical problem by getting better models that don't make these sorts of errors?
Interesting question. I'm not entirely sure. I think mostly what you said is true. The examples I gave are fundamentally problems with the models. And they could probably be addressed to a very large extent, by improving design in the algorithms in the models. Okay? And my assumption here is that why I'm concluding that is because those companies that made those mistakes, they have so much data that probably there is enough wealth of data there to address that from the point of view of the algorithms. But that's not always the case. There are many cases where you just don't have the data that you need. Let's say you're here at CBA. Let's say you want to do credit scoring in a way that it's not biased towards race. Okay? Now, the only way you can actually do that well is if you know the race of people. All right? Because you need to ensure that race ends up not being correlated with other stuff that you use. But the only way to test that correlation is to have race. But what if you don't have race? That's not the problem with the model. It's a problem with the data, and you need to figure out other ideas. Maybe you can be clever without data and address that. But it's an issue where you have to go back to the data.
Question at the far end?
Yeah, maybe a slightly left field one. But I think as machine learning people, we're often very reticent to anthropomorphize the models that we build. But I wonder if that's unhelpful to ethics. So if you hire a CEO, do you look at more than just their ability to pull in profit as they make decisions that affect millions of people? You look at a whole range of factors. But with the model, we say, it's not smart, it's okay, it's just a simple optimization problem. And then we let it get away with all these things. Whereas if you, I guess, hold it to a more human standard and say, well, if I let a human in charge of, fairly autonomous decision-making power of millions of people, would I accept that? I wonder if there's something we can get in that vein.
Okay, so let me see if I clearly understood the question. Is your question about whether a human, even if that human would make a decision that would be ethically as ethical as a machine would do, would be more accepted because it's a human, or would indeed be more ethical than the machine decision?
No, I feel like we hold our algorithms to a much lower standard than we would to a human, and they just don't live that standard.
Okay. I like that question because humans have something that the algorithms don't have yet, which is there's a lot of tacit knowledge in the heads of people that haven't been explicitly encoded and resulting in training set and so on. Well, in fact, the reason why machine learning works, it's because it's transforming tacit knowledge from people's head into code. That's what it is. When you define a label and you figure out the correlations between your features and your label, what you're really doing is creating code that's reverse engineering the tacit knowledge that people have in their heads. That's what you're doing. So machine learning is the first step to achieve a human-like level of comprehensive analysis, but we are still in very early stages of machine learning. So the way I see it, we have the right gradient, we are going the right direction, but we are deluded that we are already far enough. We are not far enough. We just made a little bit of progress.
In the middle here?
Yeah, hi. So you focus quite a bit on the ethical implications of judging people, I guess. But I guess there are other ethical implications of big data and data science as well. Like, for example, I remember just coming home last night and the news was on talking about the Perth company that had all the medical data and was selling it to attorneys, basically.
Yes.
Like, so I guess some people don't mind that sort of thing. I'm in that camp, you know, I don't mind the whole targeted marketing kind of thing. But I guess to a lot of people would see that as unethical as well. You know, so how would we? I guess the thing is, how would we make sure that companies don't try to use it for other profits as well? I guess.
Well, again, it's such a complex and big space. And we're completely right. The scope of this presentation didn't include that. It was completely within decision making, right? Automated decision making. Now, in terms of making use of your data for purposes that are different from those that have been agreed in a contract, well, I think we've seen by now numerous issues of breaches of that kind of trust. And from an outsider perspective, my view is that hopefully this will create enough awareness so that people start to think hard about that, just like, you know, people like us, like I've been trying to think hard about the specific domain of decision making. People need to think about the privacy issues and the trust issues. Trust is a big problem. I think it has to be solved by both technology and good political action. I think if you just look at technology or just politics, you can't solve it. I think maybe that's the only thing I have to say on that matter. But I agree, this doesn't cover the whole ethical space.
Yep.
So what's ethical in one part of the country is not necessarily ethical in some other. It's very much depending on cultural background. So for example, also the time frame in about 300 up until 300 years ago, slave trade was accepted, but now it is clear.
Yes,
so
correct.
The time and the cultural background makes that ethical question. What is ethical and what is not ethical?
Correct.
It's a very complex problem. So it's how do you solve this with that It's very complex.
I completely agree with you. I think it's so complex, in fact, that I deliberately decided not to address it today, as I said in the beginning, right? So you were talking about the evaluation problem, and the only thing that I have to say about the evaluation problem is that I'm certainly not a moral relativist. I think that's complete bullshit. And as science has shown, and there's plenty of evidence that there is something called pain. There are states that no one wants to be in, okay? And those states of the world where everyone is in those states is a strictly worse world than many other worlds. So now what's in between complete suffering and complete bliss, it's a very, very complex landscape. And it's going to depend on time, as you said, 300 years or now. It's going to depend on space. It's going to depend on cultures. It's going to depend on a variety of factors. But ultimately, you're talking about things that can be measured. You can't ask people how well they are feeling at each point in time. So I do believe that we will go towards moral truth in that sense. You'll get more and more towards a more scientific approach towards the evaluation problem, just as we are definitely well on the path for addressing the causation problem from a scientific perspective.
Thank you very much, Tiberio. It's a great fundamental thing. And just to add to the previous question, actually, first let me identify myself. I started calling myself data philosopher. And I just want to quickly, actually, before I make the question, there's some 10 principles that so far I didn't find really challenging the
10 principles?
10 principles.
No, you're not going to read all the 10 principles.
Just to read some. That matter and consciousness and substance and everything. And change and negation of continuity, some important principles. So as we say, you know, at time as well, there's some principles which, no matter whether we put just the ethics or there's many other principles, we are always going to fail if you don't look at the high principle of what we are doing, because too soon we are going to how rather than thinking of why, which is the highest philosophical concept.
Yeah. No, I think
so first we have to solve the philosophical questions before trying to solve the technical.
I would say we need to work together, right? Because if we wait until all philosophical questions are solved,
I'm not saying to first solve before doing anything, but we have to always put that first to align.
I agree with that.
We have two more questions. One at the far end.
Okay, first, thanks for the good talk. How do you define that one of your features it's actually like a potential problem? For example, if you have geographical data that point to people for some area, it's more likely to have the car stolen. So, for example, if you have the insurance company that actually has the data and they ask for more, like it's more expensive for people in that area, maybe you don't see that as an ethical issue, but it's like maybe if your algorithm says that person from that area, like what defines it as it's a problem or not? Like how do you define that?
Right, I guess, well, there is regulation that defines, there is discrimination acts that defines that you can't discriminate people based on certain traits, like gender, for example, right? Race, and so on. So certain traits of those you may have available in your data set, like gender, right? And in that case, you use that to create your category. Now, if you want to go beyond that, to do something that we all should do, which is go beyond regulation, because regulation is behind, we need to be ethical. It's ethics first, right? Regulation comes always after ethics. It learns from ethical growth. Then we need to have a debate and say, well, what is reasonable here? Is this something, if I assess a variety of fairness metrics on certain subpopulations, for example, if I can discover who is a Torres Strait Islander okay, in my data set, and I see that the margins for insurance there are 20% instead of 10%, which is the rest of the population. Why is that? Understanding the causes of this surplus is fundamental, but then I would need the data for that. But we need to go beyond. We need to really work on understanding. We know of certain subgroups, subpopulations that have been historically disadvantaged, and not only those that are protected in anti-discrimination acts, but it's part of our job. You need to go out and learn law and learn ethics. It's your job. Go there and do that. Stop just doing modeling. Go and read the law. That's what they have to do. Yeah.
So your ability to recognize patterns far exceeds the ability to understand causation, because it really requires, especially if this, if you're going to personalize things, requires some sort of really fundamental understanding of human nature that we don't have, and we're not collecting the data that we would need. So you got both problems there. So should we not be using these models until we can satisfy those criteria?
Very interesting comment. I'm very happy that you asked that question. It is true that our ability to detect patterns, to detect correlations, is superior to our ability to detect reliable causal connections, right? That is true. However, that doesn't say anything about our ability to create technology, to create science, to create algorithms, to create other brains that can identify causality successfully, even in a way that we can't understand. Because, look, causality and understanding is not the same. Understanding is a statement about two things. It's about interaction between the human brain and the world, whereas causality isn't. Causality is just a statement about the world. This causes that, this causes that. Now, as soon as you demand that a human has to actually understand something, you're already losing. You're already losing. You're already imposing our limitations, and therefore you're right. If you constrain to that setting, you're right. But we don't have to. We can use technology that figures out causality without us to having to understand it. And there are lots of...
You're very helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry, now we have to kind of slowly wrap it down. Two more questions. One here.
Yeah, we're facing privacy issues. Europe, to start off with, most likely the States, United States next year, where the consumer will more control, opt-in, opt-out. Perhaps that's the answer. We've got to start designing systems that the consumer, because the consumer will change in how they deal ethically about things.
That's a minefield. That's really complicated, right? Because many assumptions there. So one is that when people have choices, more choices, they make better decisions. Okay, and that assumption is known to be false. Okay, it's known to be false. Okay. Second, there is the issue that is privacy ethical?
I wasn't really saying that.
Is privacy ethical? Well, you can easily construct cases in which the most private solution is extremely unethical. So there is a landscape of complexity there between privacy and ethics. It's very complex, right? I agree that there are two fundamental values we need to cherish. One is autonomy, freedom, in the case of empowering the individuals to exercise their agency. And another one is welfare. And that's the fundamental tension in the history of ethical thinking, because many philosophers will prioritize freedom over welfare, others welfare over freedom, and then you get Mill, you get Sidgwick, you get Rawls, all trying to figure out, well, how do we bring welfare and freedom? How do we solve the problem of autonomy, but ensuring that we are actually lifting everyone, right? It's a complex problem. I don't know the answer.
And one last question to wrap up.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I did a 8-week data science bootcamp in San Francisco at the end of last year, and it troubled me that in the entire course it was completely silent on any sort of data ethics. So I stopped asking questions about that after a while. But I guess the issues that you've raised here are not unique to people as data scientists at all. I guess I was curious on your thoughts about where should education on this occur, and in organisations it seems that you need leadership from the top on ethical issues, and then how those flow down into particular algorithms that you might.
I'm very glad you asked that question. Well, you didn't ask it, you asked the question. Right? I'm going to give a talk in a couple of months. So the title of the talk is Ethics for the 21st Century. I completely agree with you. This is not about data science. This is about ethics. Okay? The question is, how are we going to conceive an ethics for the 21st century? An ethics where we have a sixth kingdom of life called technology that's interacting in a very complex, dynamical way with the others, right? And there's the problem of agency, who controls what? There's a problem of feedback loops. There's the problem of defined valuation function. There's the game theoretic problem of, self-interested agents trying to maximize their own payoff functions. So where are we going? I don't know. But what I do know is that we need to shift entirely the way we think about ethics. Entirely. Because ethics has traditionally been really a domain of study within legal scholarship and philosophy and so on. But now technology is in, so we need to bring something there. We need to add ourselves, scientists, technologists, and everyone in society needs to figure out what an ethics for the 21st century will be. That's the best I can say. I don't know anything about what it will be. I just know that this is the problem that I have to solve.
Thank you so much, Tiberio.
Thank you.
Food for thought. Just sticking around for a little longer to have a couple of answer a few more questions over drinks. So, are there any announcements? Greg, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Tiberio, thank you for that fantastic talk. I think ethics is chasing technology, and hopefully they'll catch up at some stage. So, Greg Pearl from Emerald Recruitment, purely focused on data science. Look, I'm here to support you guys both in the teams you're working with in your business, if you're looking for good people within your business around that data science and the big data arena, and also individuals who just want to know what's happening out in the marketplace. Feel free to come and have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Our other sponsor at the other end. Just want to say hi to Virginia from the CBA Talent Acquisition team. So if you want to know anything about opportunities here at CBA, what they're looking for, how you could fit in, Virginia is your point of contact. Anyone else? Yep, please.
Hello, my name is Alec Gardner. I'm the managing partner for Alpha Zeta. At the beginning, Fabian said about Eugene's various businesses, one of which he's our chief data scientist. So we're a full-service analytics consultancy firm based around having independent experts as part of our team. I know there are quite a few of our team in the room. There are also possibly some of you who did sign up previously and haven't gone through the full piece, but we're a consulting firm and we're constantly looking for staff, and we have gigs, particularly for contractors. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name's Dave. I run Moxie Studios. We build products for publishers, and we're particularly looking for data scientists and data engineers to help us build a recommendation engine. I'm looking for a contractor, sort of a 3-month contract to help on that. If you've kind of got those sort of skills, I'd be interested in having a chat.
Thanks.
Hey, Mike Bewley from NEMA. I gave a talk about a year ago on swimming pool detection. Things have come a long way since then, and I'm hiring again. We're looking for people with ideally reasonably extensive experience in imagery and deep learning. So what we do as a company is aerial imagery. We've got like 10 petabytes of imagery. We do city scale 3D. So it's lots of fun. So if you're experienced in that area, I know someone who is, then please come have a chat.
Exciting. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Ooh, it's busy tonight. Great.
Hey everyone, my name is Taufik, first time here, very glad I came.
Glad to have you.
So I'm working on a startup called Spiral Blue, and we're basically using space technology, satellite images, to try and detect pirate attacks before they happen. And I'm looking for some help with regards to machine learning, computer vision, data science, web dev, basically all the fields. These are areas that I don't have much expertise in. I can work on them, but my time is better spent on the space side and on the business side. We're very early stage, so if you have an interest in any of these areas, in piracy, maritime, or you're just a space nut like myself, please come and have a chat with me.
Thank you. And with that, yeah, I think I would like to thank all you for coming here tonight. Thank you, Tiberio, wherever you are, for a fascinating talk.